other people are making money from my software. Is that fair, or am I okay with that? Short answer, yeah, I'm fine with that. But let's get into the details a little bit. Ultimately, it comes down to the license of the software that I'm providing with the code or the project. So if we jump into the GitHub and have a look at the license that I provide to BookStack, so it's under a fairly common MIT license, and we'll quickly go through it. So it's copyright to me and the contributors of BookStack, and now this is the main bit.
Permission is hereby granted free of charge to any person obtaining a copy of this software and associated documentation files of the software to deal in this software without restriction, including without the limitation, the rights to use, copy, modify, merge, publish, distribute, sublicense, and or sell copies of the software, and to permit persons to whom the software is furnished to, subject to the following conditions. Basically, keep the copyright notice in there, and with all copies or substantial portions of the code, and then some stuff about there's no warranty, and please don't sue us if something goes wrong because it's your fault.
So yeah, within that license text, we're explicitly giving permission to be able to sell copies of that software. That's common pretty much across all open source licenses. As part of the common open source definition, you've got to provide people the freedom to do what they want with the code. And that includes selling it or using it as part of a business. If you start restricting that off, then you're not really within the open source spirit. As an example of a license that doesn't really fit into the open source spirit, I recently came across this project, Diffgram, who described themselves as an open source training data platform. And their software actually looked really cool. There's lots of kind of smart annotation stuff for machine learning, I'm assuming. But the bit that I noticed about this project in particular was the license. If we have a look at that, again, remember they call themselves open source, but within their license terms, they say it's based on the Elastic license, V2, which isn't commonly respected as an open source license itself because of the restrictions it adds on. But this company goes a step further. If we have a look at the terms here,
the license grants you a non-exclusive, royalty-free, worldwide, non-sublicensable, non-transferable license to use, copy, and prepare works of the software, in each case subject to the limitations and conditions below limitations.
So this first one is the big one. You will not in any form provide the software or any subset of the software to third parties. So immediately you're preventing distribution there, and you will not host the software for third parties to use. So that's now discounting providing as like a hosted offering, at least unless you're this company that's creating the software, or in any way attempt to distribute or make available any substantial set of the features or functionality of the software. And then you've also got you can't compete with the licensor in the same market. And they're also saying that in particular commercial conditions, based on users and things, you might have to pay for a license. Yeah, those are an example of kind of moving away from that open source ideal, because now they're putting a lot of these restrictions and explicitly blocking out that hosted offering. So if you're looking at a project like this, then companies couldn't come along and provide that as a hosted offering because a license explicitly prevents that. Now, maybe they could do kind of a deal with the company of this software and provide hosting under a specific contract or something. But under the terms of the license as it is, you couldn't do that. And again, this very much wouldn't be considered open source. And I've raised this with them before, and other than not really interested in changing that, at least their terms of open source. And I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with putting restrictions in place to protect your business. I don't want to give the impression that I'm against that, because it's important. If you're trying to make a living, you might want to protect your business and your certain revenue streams. That's absolutely fine. It's just kind of calling yourself open source at the same time, because someone might have come across your project and expect certain freedoms, because generally in open source, you're thinking about the freedoms of the code and its users. Whereas when you put terms like this onto a license, then you're really thinking about your business and how your business makes money and those kind of thoughts. So there's a bit of a conflict in ideals. So a factor that might influence my thinking in terms of other people hosting my software is that I don't really provide it as hosted offering myself. A lot of companies do this because it's a good way to fund yourself by providing hosted instances of your software that people just spin up and use straight away without any hassle of having to self-host it themselves. But personally, I really don't want to get into the realm of doing that at all. I don't want to spend my days doing infrastructure support. I just really want to focus on the software as much as possible. I don't do any of that, so I've also kind of got no interest in terms of protecting my software against being used by others and being provided as a managed service by other companies. and for them to make money off of it. In fact, I quite enjoy the idea that other people are making money from my software without really influencing me too much. That's great. If someone can make a living based off of what I've done, that's kind of a goal achieved for me, even if I'm not making a living myself. But one thing that I do off the back of that, because I don't want to provide any hosting services myself, I kind of use that to my advantage. And within my sponsorship options on GitHub here, I provide a few tiers that provide advertising on the BookStack homepage. So if we have a look at that, and it's also within the GitHub README as well for BookStack, we can see here there's a few project sponsors, and a couple of these are hosting providers. So it provides a little bit of incentive for them to sponsor me via these channels, and that doesn't give me much more responsibility, but it gives them a way to advertise on the official project itself their hosting services for that project. So I kind of use it to my advantage there, so it kind of works out in this symbiotic relationship in a way. Now, that's not the same for every company. Again, a lot of people use that as a revenue stream by providing hosted services. One example of that is Snipe IT, but I look up to this company. They do great software using a similar stack to BookStack as well, and they provide a hosted offering. If we go to their pricing, we can see them here, but they're still an open source project. If we have a look at their license, it's under the AGPL3, so it's a much longer license than the one that I use for BookStack, and it does give them a little bit of extra protection in terms that if anyone was to take this project and then provide hosting for it, then any modifications that they make to that, say if they took it away and tried to make it better to one up the Snipe IT's official offerings, then they'd also have to distribute and share their changes that they've made, at least if they're providing their hosted services publicly. That means that it's harder for others to make themselves a differentiator compared to Snipe IT, because they're the official company of this software. So generally you'd go to them as a first port of call if you're looking to purchase a managed instance. So I thought of this topic recently because a company approached me saying that they were a hosted provider, and they were basically asking permission. They were saying, hey, we know that we can host your software as per its license, but we just want to check in with you to make sure that's okay with you if we start selling hosted offerings. And they offered to contribute to the project in terms of developing and helping out on things. I thought that was really quite respectable of them to ask, because they totally didn't have to. And in most cases, people don't because they don't need to. But some companies can be funny about that. So yeah, it's quite classy of them to be upfront. And of course, I went back and said what I've said here is that, yeah, it's absolutely fine. I see it as the spirit of open source, so absolutely go ahead. But I did ask 3 things of them. And these 3 things are just built up of my experience of other people hosting BookStack over the last 7 years. So the first one is to please don't defer support to the BookStack project. So I mean that as in, if there are issues raised by your customers for this company that's going to be hosting BookStack, please don't, upon any issue, just point them directly to the GitHub project page to file an issue on our project board, because then that puts the burden of support on us. And a lot of those things are going to be hosting related. So I don't mind if those users are coming to us, in terms of features or reporting bugs. That's all great things. I don't want the company to be making money and then leaning on us for supporting their business, essentially. And just because I don't want to be overwhelmed in the long run of trying to deal with all these different support avenues, because it does take a lot of effort. That's probably where the majority of time is spent on something like BookStack, is supporting people. The second thing I requested was to please keep customer instances up to date, or have a mechanism to allow them to keep them up to date themselves. So this comes based on experience of a certain hosting provider that's providing BookStack, specifically on AWS. So if we have a look here, this company is providing a pre-configuration for machines on AWS with BookStack. They've been doing this for quite a while, but one thing that I've noticed is that their versioning can lag behind quite a lot. So if we have a look now, the latest version they've got, at least listed here, I don't know exactly how it works, but this is showing version 21.05.3. It's currently September in 22, and this is a May 2021 release. So it's over a year out of date, essentially, which isn't ideal. There's been quite a few security releases in that time, which I'd really hope that users would update to. So seeing this here with this old version number, it is not a great sign. I've even called them out on this on Twitter when they've advertised this BookStack offering, just because I really don't like this in terms of it's affecting users of BookStack. And that's what I care about. I don't care too much about how they operate their business or how about they go things, but I just don't want to have BookStack have a bad name, a lack of service from these companies. So yeah, that's one of my asks. Please keep users' instances up to date, mainly just to keep them protected, as well as get all the cool new features. So the third thing that I requested is to please do not misrepresent your relationship with BookStack, mainly because I don't want any companies referring to themselves as like the official hosting provider and misleading users under that assumption that they're providing something that's officially supported or is officially sponsoring the BookStack project in any way, or as an official partner, or they got a special inroad of support. I just want it to be completely transparent and clear to users how the company is affiliated with BookStack. I haven't particularly had any that misrepresent themselves in terms of saying that they're official partner of BookStack or something like that, but I have had some cases in terms of it being questionable how a company is relaying how they support BookStack itself. So the first of one of those that I came across was Stellar Hosted, who provide BookStack hosting, and they have done for quite a while, and they're a very early hoster of BookStack. But one thing that I was a bit uncomfortable when I first came across them was that on their website, they specifically say, we contribute 10% of our revenue back to 42 open source projects, and they had our logo listed there. And at the time, I didn't have any sponsorship methods at all, or any way of officially donating to the BookStack project. So I knew that that wasn't true in terms of, as a user looking at this, you'd think, oh, by buying this, I'm helping out the BookStack project. But at the time, I knew that that wasn't the case. But I think it might have been the case that maybe the creator of this tried to send me an email about it to try and set something up, and I didn't respond. To give them their credit, Stellar Host, as soon as I provided the sponsorship options, they quickly became one of our sponsors, and they've been a stable sponsor since. So overall, I don't want to knock them or anything, because they are sponsoring them and they are supporting BookStack as a whole by that sponsorship. And if I think I would have gone about things differently now, I would have probably called them out when I first saw that and got that cleared up as soon as possible, because I totally believe their intentions were good. It's just I'm very particular about how representation it is to the end users. Yeah, no, they're a great sponsor now. And then I had something very similar with PikaPods here, who provide managed hostings for different types of apps. Again, a lot of them open source. Yeah, they had something similar, like this section here, rewarding open source authors, saying that the revenue goes to the authors of the software. At the time, when they first notified me of this hosting offering, it absolutely wasn't clear, I thought, as a user coming to this page. It made it seem like every project that they done, they were giving back to, when in reality, it was just the projects that have a little heart. So if we go to their available apps and we kind of scroll up and down, so BookStack's there, but it doesn't have a little heart. But if we have a look, there we go, glitch tip here, that has a little heart, and there's a project has a formal revenue sharing agreement. I have no idea what that looks like. Yeah, I just thought it was a little bit cheeky at the time, and I learned of this through this issue here, where the author was asking to put a link to their hosting offering on a website, and at that point, that's when I raised my concerns in terms of user expectations, and to their credit, they were very responsive, understood completely, and then very quickly, that's like within the next day of my feedback, had their website updated to clarify things for users. That's absolutely great on their part. They're very responsive. Because I respect if you're creating a service from their point of view, you might not be thinking about that kind of user path that I'm thinking about from my perspective in terms of protecting the users and understanding what they're getting or what they're contributing back to the project itself or the software. Because creating this, you're going to be thinking about how people perceive your hosting offering. Yeah, it's just a different perspective. And as long as these companies are responsive, like both of those cases were, which have been absolutely great, then everything's all good and you can have a good kind of community working relationship, I guess. But yeah, I guess that covers my views on companies making money from my software. If you've been in a similar position, it'll be kind of cool to hear about your experiences, see if they kind of aligned with mine, or see if your philosophy is quite different on the matter. But that's everything from me, so see you in the next one.